Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our SpeakOut series. I'm Rhiannon Wicks, and I'm the administrator of the Bolt Foundation and the moderator for today's career discussion, focusing on the area of health and safety. The Bolt Foundation has a very simple but important mission to inspire the next generation of construction professionals right here in the Greater Toronto Area. One way to do that is to ensure that young people have the information they need to choose a career that they are passionate and can be successful in. This series facilitates the discussions on some of the in-demand careers in construction and how young people can get started. Our panel is made up of industry professionals, including union reps, employers, and apprentices, to provide useful insights into the education and training requirements, physical demands, what to expect day to day, and advancement opportunities with the specific career construction. I want to acknowledge and thank our series sponsor, RBC Future Launch, for their generous support of this important initiative to help close the information gap and get more youth interested in construction careers. Let's hear from our sponsors now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Beckles, and I'm the Vice President of Social Impact and Innovation here at RBC. Today, youth are the most unemployed age group in Canada, with almost 800,000 young Canadians not currently in employment, education, or training. Canada's skilled tradespeople that have long been the backbone of our economy are more critical than ever, and so is solving this sector's main challenges: the underrepresentation of women and immigrants, the need to double down on digital training, and the ongoing stigmas around trades careers. And while these challenges are significant, so are the opportunities. Through the RBC Future Launch partnership with Bolt, we aim to ensure that you understand what opportunities are available in the skilled trades industry and how to get started in a career that you are passionate about. Because at RBC, we see a future in your future.
So today's discussion focuses on the field of health and safety and some of the career opportunities available. So we're going to take a little bit of a different path this time around, and we're going to be just having more of a discussion on some of the macro and micro levels of health and safety as it's related to health and safety as a whole, but also how it relates specifically to the construction industry. So let's take a look at what a health and safety specialist does on a high-rise construction site.
Here is another career in construction that is always in demand: the safety specialist. They use their training to set up and maintain a safe work environment for all workers on the construction site. Before any worker begins working on a site, the safety specialist prepares a safety plan and a safety board, which includes all the required documents, some being the map to the nearest hospital, emergency phone numbers, etc. In order to meet the legal safety requirements, they must read and understand what's commonly called the Green Book, the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act, and regulations. Next is the plan for the site setup. This includes the layout of the temporary fencing, the necessary signage, the procedures for closing a sidewalk or lane of traffic, truck turning safety protocols, and fully stocked first aid kits, among other tasks such as worker orientation and documenting the procedures for operating the hoist. Once the work has begun, they begin their enforcement duties, which includes regular visual inspections of the construction site. When an unsafe act or condition is discovered, they begin by communicating the expectations to the workers, and also educate them on the right and wrong ways to go about their work. In the event that a worker is observed again working in an unsafe way, tickets for non-compliance are issued and disciplinary actions can be taken. It's not only about safe work methods. The responsibilities of the safety specialist doesn't stop there. It also includes setting up the policies for the prevention of violence, racial discrimination, and harassment. Construction sites without a competent and enforced safety policy can be a dangerous place. The safety specialist applies their knowledge and wisdom to saving lives every day.
Well, with that great visual, let's meet our industry panel. So Daniel, we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Dos Santos, Director of Health and Safety at Tridel Delterra. I've been working for the company since 2012. Began back then as a safety coordinator, working in some really interesting projects in downtown Toronto, such as 300 Front and 10 York. And my main activity nowadays is to make sure that the contracts, the implementation of the health and safety program, and many other things are in place in order to make sure that everyone's safe, they're going home safely to their families, and there's a good relationship between not only between our internal team but also with the trades as well.
That's wonderful. We always need a boss at the sites, right? Sal, let's move over to you.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Solomon. I go by Sal on site. I'm a senior safety specialist for Delterra. I'm going to be reaching 5 years in August. I basically do also in-house training for working at heights, women's training, and I basically work with site management to ensure inspections are being held. I'm doing inspections as well, compliance with all the documentation. So we're reviewing all the safer procedures that trades are giving us, safety talks, all that stuff. It's kind of stuff that we do on a day-to-day.
The day-to-day, all the fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ken, let's move over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ken Rayner. I'm the Vice President of Market Development and Communications at IHSA. And I've been with IHSA for about 13 years. What we do in terms of marketing communications with IHSA, who is one of 6 designated health and safety associations in the province of Ontario, is raising awareness in regards to worker rights and what employer responsibilities are and legislation, best practices, how to safely conduct the work. I know in the video it said that the work can be dangerous, but the work also can be done and executed very safely when the proper controls are put in place and when you understand the hazards in your workplace. So it doesn't have to be a dangerous job, and it really does depend on the culture of the organization and the senior leadership. It dictates in terms of how well a site is operating. Back in 1998, probably before many of you that are participating on this call were even born, something happened to me when I was a plant production manager. And in one of our big presses, we had one of our mechanics working on the press, and they didn't lock and tag out the press as was supposed to be done. And what that means is lockout tagout is that you put a lock on a mechanism so that if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, how come this machine's been turned off?" And flip it back on again, it doesn't work. And there's instructions as to why that machine has been disabled. It didn't happen, and the mechanic ended up losing his left arm from the elbow down, which you can imagine is a life-altering issue. And that was my first introduction to the Ministry of Labor, to WSIB, to really, to workplace safety. And there's a lot of people in health and safety that have had those type of things either happen to themselves or they've seen things happen to others. And that's one of the motivators for getting into health and safety. It doesn't mean everybody has to, but it's certainly when you do see something like that happen, you want to ensure that to the best of your absolute ability, that doesn't happen to anybody else, especially when you go visit them in the hospital and you see their families and how they're affected after the fact. So that's, I wouldn't say that's the only reason I got into health and safety, but it was certainly an influence for me in terms of wanting to help others and make sure that people go home safe every day. And so, as I mentioned, IHSA is one of the province's health and safety associations, and we have a video that will, let you know a little bit more about what we do and how we do it.
Infrastructure Health and Safety Association, or IHSA, is one of 4 safe workplace associations that is designated under the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
I like to think that IHSA is the go-to location for health and safety training in Ontario.
And we do that through sector-specific engagement of our stakeholders, development of our products and services, from training to the consulting services that we provide with the input of industry. We do that for no other reason than to ensure that workers can get home at the end of the day.
Training is a huge component of mitigating risk, making sure that workers are aware of what some of the risks are that they face and the barriers included in those.
What we want to see as a vision is healthy and safe workplaces free from illnesses, injuries, and fatalities. That's our ultimate goal.
At the IHSA, we have a huge variety of backgrounds and expertise amongst our staff.
Members have access to a number of services they've already paid for as they register for WSIB, and therefore they have access to them for free.
We hire people who are passionate about their work, people that want to help people, that have the experience. We hold ourselves to the highest standard.
I always think back to my first engagement with IHSA. At that time, I didn't know anything about health and safety, and they became very quickly my trusted resource for accessing training, for accessing information and building systems.
Unique to Infrastructure Health and Safety Association are our stakeholder committees. We have committees in all three of our sectors that we serve, construction, utilities, and transportation, that bring together stakeholders to address issues within health and safety in the sectors directly.
Our training facility here provides as close to a real-world environment as you can in a kind of a controlled facility. The equipment they're using is new equipment. It's top-of-the-line equipment that they would also find working at an employer.
I am extremely passionate about what I do. I take pride in what I do. If I'm offering information, I want to make sure that they're getting the right information, they're getting the most current information, and if I can help them in any way, that's what I strive for.
IHSA, work safe for life.
What an excellent overview of what the IHSA does for, not just industry professionals, but also just everyday people. And it's just incredible to watch that video and provide just a very brief insight, but with a wealth of information. And with that being said, there's a wealth of information in these three gentlemen here. So let's go over to Sal. Let's ask you a question here. So what is a health and safety specialist, and what does one actually do?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, we try to work together with the team on site, the management team on site, trying to ensure that all the procedures are brought up that are bringing it to the site are actually accurate. They're going to work properly. Like I said, we do safety talks, inspections. We also do incident investigations. It's a little bit of stuff like that.
Well, it sounds like that would be busy.
Yeah. And if you add the working at heights training and all that stuff, right?
That's a big one. And I know that's, you have to have that to work on a high-rise construction site, no matter what your role is. So that's a very important safety certificate to have for sure. What sectors do you work in other than just like health and safety? Where do you touch on when you're at the job sites?
Well, you get to touch a little bit on everything in the building, right? As you go floor by floor, you can notice new things. You want to make sure that you're aware of what's happening on site. And if there's something new that's happening, you want to have a conversation with the trade to see when did this start? When is your plan to start this? Do you have a procedure in place for this? Do I need to reach out to your safety department, right? So you touch everything, everybody on site. You have to reach out to them to make sure everything's okay, right? If it's not you, the management team also calls you in and says, hey, listen, I have this little task that we need to do. I was wondering if you could put your input, and we work together.
Awesome. That's great. And it just goes to show how much information you need to have stored in your brain, right? It's not just health and safety, it's how the trades work, all of the different trades. There are, there's over 140 skilled trades, and that's a lot of knowledge that you have to carry. So commendable.
Thank you. I have a good team, though. I have a good support team. Yeah.
It always takes a team. This is one thing that I will always take away from every conversation and discussion I'll ever have. It takes a team, always. So Daniel, let's move over to you. What does a typical day-to-day look like as a health and safety specialist?
for the health and safety specialists, depending on the company that you work for, it may differ, right? Like basically, for us in particularly, when Solomon and his teammates, when they go to sites, I think the thing that we look at is to focus on the critical tasks of site. Make sure that we are focusing on making sure that they actually are doing what they're supposed to do. The procedures are followed properly. The actual procedures are in place. They are provided to us. Basically, like what we try to work to is make sure that we have meetings arranged beforehand, so we can review these procedures together, or we can review and provide feedback on what our concerns are and some other concerns some other activities that might be interfering with someone else's task. And so our focus is to keep in mind those little details that can easily be just not paid attention to, and then eventually something can happen, someone can be injured, or an incident can happen. On my part, I'm looking more towards what else can happen in the future, right? So we try to figure out how we can include the DEI side of things. Like recently, we've been working on ways to communicate, to educate the workers in a different way. Like usually when we think about things, simple things like the site safety orientation, most companies, if not all of them, are providing this orientation in one language, English. And we're looking at it in a different way right now, working towards making sure that this video, which is a 26 minutes video, is presented to the worker in the language that they speak. So we're looking at, like, we have a specific phase of languages right now that are usually commonly seen in the construction sites. We're translating there, changing all the wording, all the closed captions, so that it's easier for the worker to understand. So if before, when looking at a video, 26 minutes video in English, they would just capture maybe 2%, 5% of it, like for some of them. So some of them, at least now we're hoping to get like 70, 80, or 90% of that information that is gathered, and eventually they can put in practice on a day. Like Ken mentioned before, I also went through the process of being injured or seeing someone injured, and you don't want anybody to go through that. And our main goal as a safety specialist, as managers or directors, is to make sure that everyone goes home safely. Like the way we look at it, we are, and Rhiannon, we always call ourselves like a tried out family. So we, as a family member of all these individuals on site, doesn't matter if it's hundreds or thousands of them, we want them all to do what they're supposed to do, but safely, so they can go home to their families, have some quality time with them, and then return to work the next day.
Wow, that's hearing all of that and everything that's taken into consideration, language barriers, getting home safely. There's so many things that a health and safety specialist needs to consider in order to make all of this information even accessible. So again, I'm going to be like all about commending everybody right now, because I'm just so impressed with the work that goes into health and safety, because it's so extremely important. So Ken, now you're in the hot seat. So what type of training does a health and safety specialist need, and how would you enter this field?
That's a great question. So the first thing I would address is that, legislative training has to be taken. So whatever is mandatory and legislative for the role that you're in, that's got to start. You got to start there first. I make a suggestion that coming in, being in 2023 and as we go forth, one of the areas of need in the province of Ontario is understanding about occupational health and safety management systems. Okay, so this type of system is no different than a system that a company would use to ensure there's quality output in what they do in manufacture. No different than a company that wants to make sure that they are harming the environment by manufacturing or producing products. And it's the same way with occupational health and safety. When an organization has a commitment to keep their workers safe from senior leadership, and as Daniel said, to want them to go home safely every single day, then implementing a system such as ISO 45001 or CORE, which is also known as the Certificate of Recognition Program, which you can see the logo behind me right here, of which IHSA is the regulatory body for Ontario. It's a great need right now. We're fast approaching 700 companies in Ontario that have already become certified to the CORE standard. And we have approximately 17 to 1,800 that are in the queue working towards it. So all of a sudden, in a few years, you're going to have potentially 2,500 firms that need assistance, that need help in terms of continuing to manage their ongoing system, and then others that are going to then be required to implement those systems. And it's all based on the plan, do, check, act type of model, which means that you've got to plan the work before you do it. When you do the work, plan, do, check after you've completed the work. Are you doing it as prescribed? Are you doing it as intended? And if it's not working, which sometimes it doesn't work, like health and safety and industry in general isn't perfect. Mistakes are made, things happen, but that's when you have an opportunity to improve. And so the biggest, one of the biggest pieces of that is that taking when things don't work, taking that opportunity to improve upon it. And then you do the whole cycle over again, right? Plan, do, check, act. So then you implement the new way of doing it, and then you continually check and monitor. Is it happening the way we intended? And so that's a great need in the province of Ontario right now. So anybody that's getting into health and safety, I would certainly recommend looking at an occupational health and safety management system and getting some training on that and understanding. And it's also really important to understand legislation. Like that's what everything's based on. And if you don't understand what's written in legislation, it makes it, it makes your job more challenging. So, we're certainly understanding the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which the majority of companies in Ontario are under, but you also have companies, not usually in construction, but companies that fall under the Canada Labour Code, which is for federal companies. So companies like rail and transportation companies and airlines and insurance and telecommunications typically fall under a different set of health and safety legislation. So it's really important for you to understand which legislation you fall under and what it says. In regards to how do you enter the field, I can tell you how IHSA approaches it. And our take is that anybody that's giving health and safety guidance and advice had better be coming from a sort of a field of legitimacy and credibility. And the way that you get to that is you become competent and experienced and you have expertise in the field that you're talking about. And so it is really important to first understand the work. You will connect more with people if you move into health and safety down the road with those workers when they understand that you understand their job. You understand the task. You understand how it works. And then when you're talking about making improvements, you're doing it from an area of expertise, your own experience, and you can communicate and connect with those workers and those supervisors on providing guidance to help. So if you're ever at an IHSA class, I can tell you that every single one of our instructors come from industry. They're either hired from construction, the electrical utilities, or transportation, and they've got to have a practical background in doing the work. We can teach them about health and safety, but we can't teach them about how the work is conducted safely, right? We can teach them about health and safety legislation, but from them knowing how to do the work, that is really important. So if you want to have, I think, a level of respect when it comes to providing health and safety knowledge and guidance, then it certainly helps to understand how the work is conducted first by doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a great model, right? It's like, it's easier to discuss and teach and preach when you've done it, right? So, and I think that is a really great bridge into the next question for Sal, because he this is exactly what he does, right? He does working at heights training, and he works at heights, so he can preach about it, and it can be respected, right? Because you've done it. So that being said, like tell us how you came to be as a senior safety specialist at Tridel, and how long did it take?
All right, so I've been doing the construction. I've been in construction for about 16 years. Started back in 2007, and I started actually with asbestos. So going back to what Ken was saying, legislative training. So in order for me to start work, we had to take asbestos worker training, women's training, working at fall protection back in the day. And then I realized that we were falling behind on the training, right? And nobody else was interested. And just to give you a little bit of background myself, I had graduated high school in Colombia and had not wanted to go back to school. So school wasn't something that I wanted really to go forward. But when I started joining all these trainings, started taking all these trainings, I realized like, now I'm interested in this. And then it went from only taking train the trainer for women's and fall protection to taking the train the trainer for scaffolding to taking trainings in confined space and taking trainings in anything, all this stuff. Like I know most of the guys at IHSA, well, when it was called CSAO. So that they became like a family for me as well. And they were all those trainers were my mentors, right? So I came across a lot of barriers, and they were always there, a phone call away, a train away, helped me through the process. So I went through different industries. I did a little bit of with another company, I did smart centers and stuff like that. Then I moved on to the high rise, and then I ended up here with Tridel, right? So all those little experiences helped me build myself to where I am right now. And then about a year ago, Daniel offered me the instructor position, the in-house instructor position for working at Heights, and I said, all right, let's give it a shot. And it's just for me, it feels good to do safety, right? And especially at one point, it's like I'm getting paid to help, basically, right? Because it feels good. So that's why getting up every morning, it's easy to do. And again, like I said, it's also very important to have a good support team. When it comes to the safety department, they're really good at supporting their staff, but the company as well. They're all about safety. There's never an issue when you need to when you need stuff, when you need to order stuff or stuff like that. So I feel really comfortable where I am working and as a safety specialist, because it takes a little bit of everything to make you feel good where you are. And that's basically my story.
No, that's great. And you know what? And that's exactly it. Like, you feel safe at work, and you are able to, like, this is exactly what IHSA is striving for, right? This whole idea that you're safe at work. It's in every facet of your work. Like, I come to work and I'm not worried. Ken and I were talking about it this morning, where, Tridel really in every spot they possibly can, safety is implemented every day, no matter whether you're on site, at head office. It's a way of life, and it's so nice that to feel that way. And I think that's the goal, is that every place feels that way. You go to work and you're safe and you're supported, and you're part of a big giant family. So it's a good feeling. Yeah. It's a good goal.
Support is very important because one of the key things when I go to site is I approach management and I ask, okay, what's going on today, right? But I also approach all the trades, and I approach the laborers, and I say, okay, what's going on today, or what's going on, what happened this week, or what should I expect, right? And it's not just it's because it gives me a bigger perspective of where the site is, where it's going, right? Sometimes they'll say, yesterday we couldn't pour some concrete, so now we're backed up, now this is happening. So I kind of understand, okay, me showing up today is probably not too happy. So I'm gonna take a different approach today. Maybe I'm gonna focus on something else, let them catch up with their work, right? So it's very important also to be in tune with everybody on site and with the site itself, right? And the site super, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's nice to hear that everybody is working well together.
Yeah.
So speaking of sort of day-to-day work-life balance, Daniel, tell us about what are the average working days like? Like, how long are they? Working at Heights, we know is going to happen. What about the weather? Like, all these things that happen in construction.
Yes. So for the health and safety professional site, usually it's 8 hours, 9 hours. Of course, there are days where things are a little bit more calm due to the weather, maybe a snowstorm or freezing rain or maybe it's raining and you are in the excavation phase of the project, so there's not much happening, so you can catch up with a few things in the trailer, and eventually the project shuts down for the day, go home. But there are other days that things get a little bit more complicated. Maybe the crane is being erected at the time or being dismantled. Things get a little bit complicated along the way. They have to extend the time, but it doesn't happen that often, right? So that's a good thing about it. We don't usually have to work so much about weekends, and that's another good thing about it. As for the weather itself, working at heights and the weather, it's a really complicated. So usually, when you intend to erect a crane or dismantle the crane, or if you're planning to extend the hoist material, or if you're doing any other type of activity, forming work, for instance, it tends to be very difficult. Workers have to be very cautious about how they work, how they keep the work area. Usually we use de-icing products to clean the access egress areas clean. They have to inspect even the ladders because they might be completely covered with ice and run. All these things they have to take in consideration. Even recently, the Ministry of Labor brought up, I think there was an advisory in regards to the fall protection equipment. Usually the workers are, depending on the activity, if they don't have a guardrail system in place, they have to wear a full body harness, which has some kind of lifeline or rope grab or a retractable system. In our case, most of our workers do have a retractable, a leading edge retractable. So it's a steel cable that it's always adjusting accordingly to keep the worker away from the leading edge. But if they don't store that equipment properly, the weather, the freezing rain, all that stuff can cause damages to the equipment itself. And then when you need the most, it doesn't work. So the education part of it, that goes back to what Saul was talking about earlier, that educating the workers is the most important thing. That's why we really emphasize the need for our own staff to get training from IHSA, because we know for a fact that we have the proper personnel there. The staff is amazing. They know exactly what they're doing. They know the education is there. And then when we provide that education to our staff, and then even through the working heights training that Saul does internally, we focus mainly on the type of equipment that we use and all that stuff. It gives them a different insight of what to do in specific scenarios and how to do it and when to stop. That's the most important thing, because a lot of people think like just go. Construction workers tend to think that way, and then it is important for them to understand that there will be a time that we have to stop, and it's crucial for us to stop. And Saul mentioned before, our senior management has no issues in supporting that process, and that's a really great way for us to make sure that when they are in these particular scenarios, they know exactly what to do, and we can actually help them go through that process properly.
Right. I think that's probably also why there is both provincial and federal regulations around work, as you're talking about. I'm like, no kidding, we live in Ontario when you have to worry about like all of those different aspects of safety on the job site and the weather and even how it relates to the equipment, right? Like I never would have thought about, like your cables and all of these things that can get left out in the weather and get damaged. And like I'm learning a lot here. This is great. So, so let's move over to Ken here, and let's talk about this. What questions should our audience consider asking a prospective employer before accepting a position?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I'm going to guess, I'd almost love to hear from some of the participants in the chat. Like if we could go to that later, like have you ever asked a question to a prospective employer about health and safety? Have you ever asked them whether they have WSIB coverage? They might say, oh, no, we got insurance. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Well, the insurance they have might be insurance that, covers if you put a hole in the equipment or you break the equipment. But if you put a hole in your hand, that type of insurance isn't going to cover. It's only WSIB, as you can see back here, the WSIB logo. So that's the insurance in Ontario for employers and workers to ensure that if something happens on the job, they're covered. And it's a simple thing to check. You can even know that before an interview by just Google WSIB e-clearance. It'll take you to a site where all you have to do is put in the name of the company and click search. And most likely you're going to find fairly easily the company name, and you can verify whether they have up-to-date coverage with WSIB. Pretty important, right? Because that should be an indicator of their commitment to health and safety. Now, things happen, and sometimes people get behind on their payments, but it doesn't mean they're not a good company, but it's one indicator. I'd also ask about worker orientation. So if I get hired here, how are you going to ensure that I understand the hazards in the workplace? And how are you going to ensure that I go home safe every day, right? As a new worker, it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And when I say new, I don't necessarily mean young. It can be a new worker for someone who has, been a truck driver for 20 years and decides they want to go into the construction industry instead. And they're old, like me, 53, right? And they got gray hair and they're deciding to change careers. Well, they're still a new worker, right? They don't understand what goes on at a work site. Maybe they've never been on a construction project. So they really, having that worker orientation and understanding what that's all about is important. I would ask about, how do you ensure that I go home safe every day? What are those controls that you put in place? What system do you use, right? Ask some questions about health and safety. It's your life, right? Work safe for life. That's our motto at IHSA. So, ask those questions. Don't just be concerned about how much you're going to get paid and do I get an extra shirt so I don't have to wash this one all the time, those type of things. And how long is lunch? Is it half an hour, an hour? Ask questions about health and safety. And if you're not getting a good feeling, don't work there. It's important. You only have one life. So make sure that when you get into construction in particular, construction can be an incredibly rewarding career. It can be, stimulating. It can be interesting. It can be diverse. There's always something going on. If you like a job with all kinds of intricacies to it and lots of complexity, it certainly can be it. And it can be done safely. Mm-hmm. Don't let someone tell you that construction is dangerous. Yeah. Construction can be done very safely when you know the hazards in your workplace and you understand what controls are put in place to keep you safe.
Absolutely. And I think, you've got for our company, Tridel, you've got Daniel who works extremely hard, making sure that all of our safety protocols are up to date based on all of the wealth of knowledge that's out there. And, you've got Sal on site, making sure that every single human is safe, on those sites. And it's incredible the amount of effort that's put into health and safety. It's quite commendable, frankly. And if every construction site took the time to put in this type of effort, then, there wouldn't be a question mark around safety as much. Life happens, things happen, but for the most part, there's just a lot of effort here. So it's nice to see that there's organizations to sort of help pave the way to try and, make it all make sense. Because it's a big field. It's a lot of information. And knowing what questions to ask is really important because not everybody knows the questions, so thank you for providing that information. So we're going to take this over to Daniel and we're going to go a little bit off topic, but sort of back to where we were before. But what makes a successful specialist? And, this sort of touches a little bit on the experience which we've talked about quite extensively, but what would you like to see? Sal brings some incredible skills. So what do you think is important for a specialist?
I would say continue to bring the curiosity that Ken mentioned before, right? Raise questions, ask about what they would do for you. But then when you get to work, when you get hired, right, it's important for you to ask questions about a bunch of different things. It is important to know the process. How should we do this? How a different company does, like what is expected from me, and get curious about all these little details and all the things surrounding you will help you. Ken mentioned before too, like about learning from mistakes. So whenever you make a mistake, take notes of that. Try to figure out, like, how can I make this better? Like, if I had a chance to do it right, how would I do it? And then work towards it, because eventually the same issues will appear again. So might as well just start working from right now rather than waiting for that moment to come again. There are other things. Saul mentioned about relationships with your own team, relationship with the trades, relationship with associations, with the government agencies, the inspectors themselves, because they also provide very key points for you to be successful. They will teach you. The point now is not to be enforced and praise, just being police, safety cops, as we used to call before, right? Like, now the idea is to make sure that people understand, so they continue to do it even when you turn your back and go away to do something else. So making sure that you understand that process of the relationship, that when you get the trust from someone, you gain that trust, then the probability for that person to actually implement things that you talked about will be high. It will continue. So then have that in place. And then if you don't know something, you are unsure about how to proceed, then look for the answers. Go online. There's so many different options out there. IHSA, for example, they have a huge section just for safety talks. They have like the other points about CORE, and all these things can be extremely helpful for someone that wants to be successful. Although, yeah, there are other things that you can do, as get education through a bunch of different options, through IHSA, through I went to what I used to call Ryerson, now the Toronto Metropolitan University. I took the occupational health and safety management there. It is helpful. It does give you a lot of information, but then you also to try to figure out, get the experience from the field level. Even when you are already experienced, like most of us here have done this for a long time. Actually, all of us here in this panel, we can say that even though you have done this for more than a decade, you're still learning. You're still trying to get more and more knowledge about these things. So then just keep looking for opportunities to improve, to think outside the box. Don't think, no one is doing this. A lot of people think that they say, no one is doing it. So that means that we're never going to improve. It doesn't mean anything. Let's just try to think outside the box, try to provide information how this is going to be effective and how this is going to help everyone. Sometimes it makes them be more productive, and everyone, it will give us the opportunity to be safe at the same time. So I think those things, when are implemented, when you look for it, when you talk to other safety professionals like ourselves, we also discuss things with our other safety professionals that work for our competitors, and we share information. We work with RESCON, so many different groups that can help us to be more safety conscious, detail oriented. And then at the end of the day, it's just to make sure everyone is smiling, saying bye to each other, and happy and safe.
That's great. And, I took from that just like this culture of health and safety, right? And just making sure that everybody's on the same team, playing the same game. And it's just looking out for each other. And, obviously there's a lot of fine print involved in all of that with the actual safety protocols. But at the end of the day, it's everybody working as a team to keep each other safe. And I love that point, just that they're going to continue being safe even when your back is turned, right? Because that's the whole point of being on site and having managers to be able to this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and this is why it's safer. And then you turn around and they continue doing that. So that's definitely an amazing task to have to perform. And kudos to those of you that have to do that. Ken, I'm going to pose a long question to you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, so how does working for a member of Ontario's occupational health and safety system, such as IHSA, differ from working in occupational health and safety for a construction company like Delterra?
Okay. So let me just make sure that everyone's clear on when we talk about Ontario's prevention system, right? So that includes the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. They have the mandate for enforcement in the province. They also have the prevention mandate. So our Chief Prevention Officer, Dr. Joel Moody, is part of the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. We have WSIB, very important piece of it as well. That's where all the premiums flow from, from employers, remittances to provide coverage, and a small portion of that comes over to fund the prevention system, which then consists of the ministry as well as 6 designated health and safety associations. So when we're working at the prevention system level, it's very macro. We're working to help change things across industry. We're looking to change and improve legislation. When you're talking about working for a company, you're now talking about the micro level, and both can be equally rewarding because I think you get benefits of both, right? You have at the prevention, within the prevention system, you have an opportunity to perhaps make change across industry, but that change comes slow. And sometimes you don't always see the results. But when you're working like Sal and Daniel, and they make changes to improve their own workplace, they start to see those changes right away. And I would expect for both of them that that's very fulfilling because they know that they've helped to be part of a system that's helped to identify something that needs correcting, needs changing, needs improving. They've worked with others to find out the best way possible to make that change. They've implemented it, and now the workers are working safely, and that can be very, very rewarding. So, I think it's really both careers can, with your working at the prevention system level, where you're working at an organization, equally rewarding. We're looking just to do things at a macro to a micro level, but they're very connected as well. And you've heard Daniel and Sal mention IHSA many times in terms of where they go for information and how they get how they get training and things like that. Well, I got news for you. We have a volunteer network of hundreds of professionals across Ontario that work within our labor management network. And so these are all the professionals that come together on a monthly basis, and they are providing us input in terms of what's going on in there. We're asking them questions and putting challenges to them, and they're helping us come up with solutions. So it's very important to note that IHSA doesn't do this on their own, right? We work with industry. So, when you're whether you're working within the prevention system or whether you're working at a company, you're probably going to have a chance to influence each other and to work with each other. And in many cases, we have times where people are working in construction and then they decide, I want to be a ministry inspector, and they join the ministry to do that. Or they decide to join WSIB, or they come to IHSA to be a trainer, a consultant trainer, so that they can help to spread the word to others in terms of how to work safely.
That's wonderful. Daniel or Sal, do you have any comments to make on that and sort of our on the occupational side of it from a company perspective as opposed to this sort of larger branch?
I think from my perspective, it's important to realize that IHSA helps in a lot of different levels, but it's also the people that work in there make it so much easier to do your work. So mentorship is a big thing in this industry, not just construction, not just safety, but I guess in every aspect. And I don't know, don't be scared to ask questions. There's a lot of people out there that's willing to help. There's some people who are not willing to help, but there's a lot of people that are willing to help. So always keep that in mind. It may be rough at the beginning, but you'll eventually start noticing where you want to go. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So Sal, we'll keep it with you for now. Tell us what you love most about your job and some of the challenges you might face.
Well, to start with, I love that I get to jump from site to site on a weekly basis. So I'm not in the same site for more than one day a week. I get to see a lot of people. That's a big thing for me. Building relationship is very important, and through those relationships is where you're able to kind of extend those. Give advice or kind of bring up to their attention what's happening, right? Like I said, we work in an industry that everything is going at a very fast. Nobody wants to stop to do anything, so you have to consider that all the time. So, yeah, it's important just to work with everybody and make sure that everybody sees what you're trying to do, but also they see that you notice what they're trying to do as well, right? So keep that balance.
Mm-hmm. Balance is key.
For everything.
For everything. It's a really, really good word. So, you know what, Ken, let's bring this back to you for a minute. So what should someone interested in this work need to know before they get started?
Okay, well, I'm going to maybe say something, I don't say controversial, but I'm hoping that Daniel and Sal agree with me on this. I think you have to have thick skin, to use that analogy. And I'll tell you why, is because you're most likely to care about other people's safety more than they care about themselves in some regards, right? So you're going to see people that are going to be performing some acts that you wouldn't do yourself, right? And you're concerned about their own health and safety, and you're going to try and connect with them and influence them to the best way possible in terms of, getting them to adhere to what you believe to be the best practices to send them home safe, right? And also understanding that health and safety, in fairness, in our society today, isn't always number one, right? It should be number one, and we want to make it number one. But that's just the role of society today. There's other factors that sometimes come higher than that. But if you ask the question, does a worker want to go home at the end of the day safely and healthy in the same way they came to work? I'm pretty sure the answer is always going to be yes, right? So it is important. But it's one of those things where. From a health and safety perspective, you may care more about someone's safety than they care about their own. And sometimes that's tough. But you know what? If you really do care about them, you're going to find a way to get through to them.
Absolutely. It speaks to that culture of health and safety, right? It takes the whole team. And, the fact that you might care about somebody else's health and safety more than them just speaks to maybe they don't have the right knowledge. Right. So, and that's where, you can step in and just be like, you know what, this is why this isn't safe. And sorry, but yep. I think you would be happier if you do it this way. And sure enough, I'm sure they would see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to that. Right. So that's excellent. And then our final question to Daniel, before I ask one question of all of you, Daniel, how does someone get started? You're our head honcho over here.
There are many different ways. I think when back in the days when Ken, Saul, and I started this, the resources, the opportunities were much less than what it is right now. There's so many different resources out there. I think that what someone can do is to start learning how things work, what is expected, what the industry or that they are interested in, how they work, what is expected of them. There are so many different things. They can watch videos, they can watch podcasts, they can listen to podcasts, they can read information out there. They can go to WSIB website, learn more about the program. We're proud members of the program. They can learn more about HSA and what their resources are, Ministry of Labor, and then there's so many different other things. They can also start to create their network, right? So then communicate with even industry leaders, such as all of us here, get to know us, contact, talk to us, or perhaps get more raise questions. I remember in the past, I didn't have much information, so then I would contact people through LinkedIn, get them, ask them for help. So then you start to get more knowledge about how you can start get some courses, maybe working at heights, maybe basic supervision, maybe getting certified as a joint health safety representative, and then move on from there. Start getting more and more knowledge about health and safety, and then from there, and then of course knowing how the industry works. Like in my case, I was a finished carpenter before working in health and safety, so it was easy for me to understand how the environment was because I was in that. Perhaps if you're already working as a trade worker, or if you know maybe your parents or your brothers and sisters, whoever it is, like if they're doing that, or they've done that, maybe try to get information of how it was when they worked, or how when not right now since they're working in that type of industry, and then try to get the sense of how things work internally, and how things are, and how it can be part of that environment, and how you can truly promote and benefit from the safety culture that it is implemented or in their work facility.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, or companies of 20 or more should have a health and safety committee. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that's a great way to get involved too, right? If you work for a little bit of a larger company, maybe you want to volunteer to be the safety rep, and maybe you want to, sort of help write some of these procedures, right? So this has been great. So I'm going to pose one final question, and if everybody wants to take 30 seconds to throw in a piece of advice, Daniel, let's start with you. Give us a piece of advice for pursuing this type of career.
Be curious.
Be curious.
Be diligent.
I love it. Okay, Ken, give us some advice.
I love the ask questions one. I think that's, and being curious. I think many times when we get into trouble is when we don't ask the questions. And so, understand that in Ontario, workers have 3 legislative rights. They have the right to know. So an employer is supposed to share with you everything that has the propensity to hurt you in the workplace, and understanding how they're going to keep you protected. You have the right to participate, which you just said, right? Join the Joint Health and Safety Committee. Volunteer to be a health and safety rep. Volunteer to take training, whatever it takes, right? And the last one is the right to refuse unsafe work. If you feel in the pit of your stomach that somebody is asking you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with, you have the right to refuse. And then what typically happens is, you're going to get some competent people that can take a look at the situation and determine whether or not changes have to be made if that work is going to be conducted safely, right? So know your 3 rights, and they're not privileges, they're rights, so they can't be taken away. So own them and make sure that your employer is following them as well.
Beautiful. I like that. They are rights, not privileges. Sal, last but not least, words of wisdom.
I'm gonna stick with what I said earlier. Definitely ask questions, and like Daniel said, be curious and just open up a little bit. I think the safety industry is full of amazing people from all parts of life, and it's a pretty cool industry. I really like it. I enjoy it. So ask questions, get to know more about safety, and definitely what you said, join a health safety committee is a good start, because it's not a lot of pressure, but it does give you access to all the information that needs to be set up. So once you get that information, you're going to realize, okay, maybe I do want to get into this, or maybe this is just something that I don't want to look into. So yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you all so much for participating, and it's been so enlightening. I've really enjoyed talking with all of you. I've learned a lot. I'm going to go home and tell my kids all of the things about health and safety. They're going to be pros by the end of the night. So thank you again. And yeah, we'll be in touch.